And we're back for the Sand Marble Rally Power Rankings after race 9. And wow, what a race! We have a lot to get through today because that race has just made this championship a whole lot more interesting going into the 10th and the final round. And we're going to go through all 16 marbles in the order that I've ranked them based on their current form after race 9, as I have been. And then we're going to go through every marbles race and what their race in the final round really means for the whole championship and for them. But before we do that, let's just talk a bit about the actual race. That race, I think, it was pretty exciting. I'd rate that about an 8 out of 10, which is like one of the better ones of the season. The season overall has been pretty good in my opinion. One of the best Sand Marble Rally seasons there is, and if it's the best one, if it's better than season 5, that's gonna be determined based on the finale. Because the finale could easily be very close, all the way down to the wire, or it could be decided in the first few seconds if one marble gets out in front. But for race 9, we saw an interesting course. I think the course design was pretty good. Should give us a good title decider. The start of it was pretty interesting. It had like some interesting slaloms at the beginning, which kind of mixed up the order. So I don't actually think the starting position is your standard. The center front is always the best, because there are some stuff about the starting position, especially the far right, I think, was actually a good place to start, and that's very important for both this race and for the finale. If we see who's starting there, but aside from that, I don't think I have much to talk about this race. Aside from the competitors that did well, and we'll go through them when we go through each of the competitors. So in 16th, rank 16th, it is not red number 3, it's Cool Moody. And Cool Moody was ranked 14th after race 8. I've dropped them 2 spots down to 16th. They got 12th in this race. There were 14 finishers, so they were the third last finisher. And they started in P10, which isn't great, but I still think starting 10th and finishing 12th still means that you didn't have that great of a race. And evidently, Cool Moody, compared to some of the other marbles around them, in the rankings down there, like red number 3, Blizzard Blaster, they had better races. With Cool Moody, I think if you look at their race, they started middle back row. Not amazing, but I definitely don't think that was the worst starting position. I think if you were towards the left, in general in this race, you didn't have a great position, especially those like Cobra and Ghost Plasma in the far left and in the back row. I think they had the worst starting positions. Cool Moody, I think they had a chance to do something with their position. And if we look at their start, they got an okay start. Actually, it wasn't great. They got ahead of like only a few marbles at the beginning, and then once they reached the little left turn and then right turn, they were like in 14th. So the start was not good for Cool Moody, and we never really saw them make up any ground. They were the cause of the DNF from Ghost Plasma, because they bumped Ghost Plasma and made them lose their momentum. And Ghost Plasma was in the back at that point anyway, so you could clearly see Cool Moody, they never really got out of like a bottom 3 spot out of the ones that were still running. And we saw in previous races as well, Cool Moody, they just haven't seemed to be able to do that well. In race 8, they got 14th, last of the finishers. Race 7, they were 13th. No, that's the standings. The race 7, they were DNF, of course. They were running well, and then they DNF. So Cool Moody, this season has gone from what was looking like a middling season, like about middle of the pack, 8th, 9th, to now they're all the way in the bottom and hoping to get out of last place. And I'm not convinced, because they're only 4 points ahead of Cobra, and Cobra has a better starting position than them in the finale. If Cool Moody gets last, that will be pretty disappointing, considering they just came off 2nd place overall. But yeah, it's been a season to forget for Cool Moody. They'll be starting in 7th in the final race, which is the front row, but it's the far left. So I don't think it's that great of a position. So yeah, Cool Moody is in 16th ranked, 15th in the standings. They can still avoid last place. They have a decent fan base, so for the sake of their fans, I hope Cool Moody doesn't bottom out. And in 15th, moving up one spot from the previous ranking, is red number 3. And also red number 3, they also got out of last place, not just the rankings, but also the actual standings, because they were in 16th coming into race 9, and with a decent result here, in 6th place in race 9, they got ahead of Cool Moody and Cobra and are in 14th. But even if it was a decent result, this was kind of the same old story that we've seen for the whole time for red number 3. They start really well. I was actually convinced in this race for sure. At about the middle part of the course, they were in second behind Crazy Cat's Eye, ahead of Slimer and everyone else, and I was convinced this is when red number 3 finally gets their podium. They're gonna get second place. It's not a win, but it's still a really good result. And then they just lose out to Slimer closer to the end of the race, and by that point the whole field is caught up, and in the final few turns, I think in the final few straights and turns, they go from 4th to 6th. And it could have been worse. 6th is still a decent points, that's double-digit points, but after starting in 5th, close to the far left, I think red number 3 could have hoped for better. They had a good start for sure to get out close to the front at the beginning, but to only get 6th after running so well for most of the race, it's kind of the same old story that we've seen from red number 3, starting well for most of the race and then just falling back at the end. But still, I think it's good enough to put them ahead of Cool Moody. And in 14th, ahead of red number 3, it's not Blizzard Blaster, it is Cobra. Cobra was in 13th after race 8. I had them ahead of Blizzard Blaster, red number 3, and Cool Moody. And they were coming off a pretty good string of results. For Cobra at least, they were in a good string of 9th, 6th, and something. But then in this race, they got 13th, and they were very anonymous the whole race. They started 16th, so 15th. They started P15, but P15, I think, the far left, far back, is the worst spot on this course. So really, what could we have expected from Cobra? Not much, and clearly they didn't really manage to exceed anyone's expectations in this race. So I don't really think moving them down 1 is a consequence of them doing that bad. It's mostly just others doing better, namely Blizzard Blaster, who we'll get to. Cobra, they're in last in the championship now, so I can't really say that they're doing too great. And that this race was great, because it wasn't. 13th out of 14 finishers and out of 16 total is not good, even if you're in the worst position. And so Cobra starting P1, they can hope to get ahead of Cool Moody, maybe red number 3 in the final race, but it's also Cobra, so I can't really bank on them to do well. And I think at least if you're a Cobra fan, you can be proud to hear that Cobra at least has kept up with the rest of the pack. It's not like last season where it was them and Blazing Fireball way off everyone else. Cobra has held their own much better in this season than the last season. Even if they're going to bottom out in this season, I definitely think even if they get a DNF in the finale, they've done a better job in season 6. So yeah, Cobra 14th, and in 13th is Blizzard Blaster. Blizzard Blaster I ranked 15th after race 8, and now I've moved them up 2 spots into 13th. And actually, Blizzard Blaster is in a pretty good position in the championship compared to the ranking position, because they're in 11th now, rising 3 spots from 14th. And they look like they're actually close to the bottom part of the mid-pack. But if you remember, Blizzard Blaster, they've had a terrible run of form before this race. And then in this race, Blizzard Blaster, they started P4 and they finished in 4th. But it wasn't exactly so clean. It wasn't exactly they were in 4th for the whole time. Actually, Blizzard Blaster, I mean, I don't think they got a great start. If we look at their start at the beginning, Blizzard Blaster, they had a good starting position for sure. P4, I think, yeah, actually they had a great start because they started with the best launch out of anyone, but then in the first few turns, they lost out a bit and fell back. And then over the course of the whole race, Blizzard Blaster, they would continue to drop. And then right towards the end, you saw them creep up back towards the front of the field, and they were in like 8th in the last half a minute leading up to the finish line. And then I think they got up to 6th, and then right at the end they got ahead of Reflektor and red number 3, and that was really impressive, and what makes me put them ahead of not only red number 3 and Cool Moody, but also Cobra, because I think they did a good job to hold on for that 4th place, especially considering the quality of the marbles ahead of them on the podium. Slimer, Ducktape, and Crazy Cat's Eye, those 3 were all doing very well in this race. And so Blizzard Blaster, after the season they've had, especially towards the latter half of the season where they've tailed off, I think Blizzard Blaster can be very proud of this performance and puts them well ahead of those like red number 3, Cool Moody, and Cobra, all the way at the bottom. And so Blizzard Blaster is in 13th. In 12th, just dropping one spot, is Grasshopper. Grasshopper was ranked 11th after race 8. I've dropped them one spot to 12th. Grasshopper, also another marble like Cobra, very anonymous in this race. They started P14, which it doesn't sound good, but actually P14 was well on the right, like just the almost the far right in the back row. And I think P8 and P16, which were the 2 spots in the far right, were actually really good compared to what you'd think, that those aren't that great of positions because they're on the edge. Because I think if you look at the start of the race, it looks like the left side is much closer to the wall compared to the right side and the right wall. The left marbles are much closer to the wall on the left side, and so it seems like the marbles on the right, especially marbles that don't have others on the right of them, like Reflektor in P8 and Superball in P16, they had no marbles to really block them from the right. So they had a clean path to make up a lot of ground. And I think Grasshopper also had a bit of this advantage from P14. But they couldn't really make good use of it because if you look at the start, Grasshopper, it looks like they get a decent start actually due to their starting position because they go into the mid pack, and from P14 you wouldn't expect that. But then after the first few turns, after the first like left-hander and then right-hander, they fall back and they're close to the end. And I don't think we ever saw them in the top half after that. They were just like one of the back markers. And it was just a slow descent down to P14 in this race. And because there were 2 DNFs, Grasshopper was the last of the finishers. And so I definitely don't think this was one of Grasshopper's better races. Grasshopper, I think they tailed off in this season a bit. They had that podium in race 6, which is pretty good, but it's becoming less and less recent, so I can't really praise them too much for that. And they were ahead of Reflektor after the last rankings, but Reflektor definitely did a much better job. Even if Reflektor had a better starting position, Reflektor still did made much better use of their good starting position than Grasshopper did. And so Grasshopper, I can't really put them any higher than 12th. They'll be starting in P3 for the next race, so still a good chance to get decent points. While Blizzard Blaster, another marble who you might think, why haven't I ranked Blizzard Blaster ahead of Grasshopper? Because Grasshopper has been overtaken by Blizzard Blaster in the standings, but Blizzard Blaster has a much worse position in the finale, so I definitely think Grasshopper will be able to get ahead of them in the standings after the final race. So Grasshopper is in 12th, and in 11th is Reflektor. Reflektor and Grasshopper just swapped from the last rankings. Reflektor went from 12th up to 11th. And Reflektor, they had P8, and I think that was one of the best spots, but Reflektor, they clearly made great use of that. They had a great start, and I don't just mean based on their jump off the gate. If you look at their start, Reflektor, they made a great move at the beginning. You can see Reflektor, they're on the far right, but they don't get out in front straight away. I think that's Blizzard Blaster, Pollo Loco, Ducktape. They get out in front, red number 3 as well. But then what Reflektor does is they hold closer to the right wall, and they kind of hit the apex of the turn, the very quick left and right turn. There's the apex on the right there that Reflektor just goes around very closely while everyone else kind of goes around more of an outside line, and that helped Reflektor get ahead of all of those marbles and hold a pretty good spot. They were in first up until Crazy Cat's Eye overtook them closer to the middle part of the race. And the later part of the race definitely wasn't that great for Reflektor because they fell back and eventually fell all the way back to 5th. They were in 4th, very close to the end, but then Blizzard Blaster got ahead, so then Reflektor finished 5th. But still, 5th is a decent point, so for a marble down in 12th in the rankings after the last race, I definitely think overall this was a decent race for Reflektor. I guess you could kind of compare it to red number 3. They had a great start and then fell back. But I think Reflektor, I mean, they beat red number 3 in this race, and they showed better pace overall. They didn't seem to fall back too much. So Reflektor gets 11th, but I can't put them any higher because they didn't hold on for a podium or anything. In 10th, and one of the only marbles not moving from their previous ranking position is Wisp of Darkness. Wisp of Darkness, of course, they had the great run of form before the last race. And I think this race was also pretty good. They got 9th, which doesn't sound amazing, but they had it from P12. And P12, I think, was definitely one of the worst spots to start. It wasn't far left back row, but it was back row, and it was towards the right, so not a center position, but also not enough towards the right that I think the bonus of starting well to the right really helped them. I don't really think Wisp of Darkness had any sort of that advantage that Superball had or that Reflektor had. And so Wisp of Darkness, I definitely think their finishing position was better than their starting position. And I think they had a pretty good race. But then again, 9th isn't amazing, so I can't really put them any higher than they already were. If you look at what they did in the race, Wisp of Darkness, if you look at their start, because I think the start is really important for defining how a marbles race goes, and then it's really just if you can hold a position. So Wisp of Darkness, they had an okay start. I think their start was better than an average marble would do from that position, because they were in about like 10th or something. And then I think they really just stayed there for most of the race. You can see, I'm not sure if they ever joined the top half. I don't think they did. So they kind of had another anonymous race, but it wasn't an anonymous race at the back. It was kind of an anonymous race in the middle. And they stayed out of trouble, uncharacteristically again, and got decent points. And now Wisp of Darkness in the championship, they're 13th. They fell back actually 1 because of Blizzard Blaster. But they have a good starting position for the finale, and I do think they can make up some ground from that 13th spot. So this is looking like a pretty good end for Wisp of Darkness, and they're one of the marbles that has been out of the A-League for a really long time. So I think overall this season hasn't been too bad for them. It was looking pretty poor the middle part of the season, but they've really turned it around. While marbles like Cool Moody, Blizzard Blaster, red number 3 fell down, and Cobra just kind of stayed there, Wisp of Darkness was able to gain some positions. So props to them. In 9th, ahead of Wisp of Darkness, is Silverbolt. And once again, the descent just keeps on going for Silverbolt. Every time it seems like they've choked a race, and maybe next race will be the one where they have a decent showing or they come back. It just hasn't happened. It just keeps on happening because Silverbolt, what did they do in this race? They got a DNF again. They didn't get a DNF in the last race, in race 8. They got 13th, which wasn't good because 13th out of 14 finishers, 13 out of 16, not good. And race 7 was when they DNF from the lead. So the last 3 races have not been good whatsoever for Silverbolt. And actually, I kind of forgot what happened with them, with what caused their DNF, because Ghost Plasma, they got bumped by Cool Moody to slow their momentum, but I don't think anything actually stop Silverbolt. I'm not sure about that, but regardless, I think whether or not it was their fault, it's kind of too little too late for their season to be redeemed, because Silverbolt, if you look at their championship position, they're now in 8th. They don't have a chance at the podium. They don't even have a chance at auto qualification like Pollo Loco does, if Pollo Loco gets like a win and Amethyst gets like last, which is like a crazy scenario. But Silverbolt doesn't even have that, and after the season they've had, after the start that they had, it's just really sad to see. And I feel like I'm repeating myself from the last video because this is kind of exactly what I was saying, but the same kind of applies. Now, why I didn't put Silverbolt even lower, why I didn't put them even lower than Wisp of Darkness or Reflektor is because neither of those two marbles really outperformed their positions by that much to make me put them ahead of Silverbolt. They're still well below Silverbolt in the standings, which shows that, Silverbolt has still done pretty good over the course of the whole season up until like race 5, race 6. And the downward spiral has only begun since race 7. And of course, power rankings are about who's doing good recently, but it's not just we only factor in the last 2-3 races and everything else before that doesn't matter. It's not like that. Silverbolt still gets a bit of credit, and I think that bit of credit for everything they did up until like race 6 still puts them ahead of Wisp of Darkness, who was kind of like the opposite, or Reflektor, who also was very inconsistent and poor at the beginning. So Silverbolt, despite the downward spiral that just keeps on going, they are in 9th, and they have a good spot for the next race. They have P6 actually, which is close to the right, not far right, but close to the right and front row. So definitely one of the best spots, I think, for Silverbolt. So if they do want to get like a good final win or final podium to close out, I could see it happening. Not with this form for sure, but if they manage to get some of that early season form, Silverbolt could get a decent result. But even if they get a win, you can see, even if Silverbolt gets a win, 71 points right now, plus 20 points, that's 91, and that's not even ahead of Ducktape in 4th. So Silverbolt, even if they get a win, the best they can do is 5th, and Amethyst and Crazy Cat's Eye, they've been doing much better as of late. I don't think, are going to let Silverbolt beat them. So really, realistically, Silverbolt's looking at 7th in the championship at best. And, after the season they had, it really shouldn't have been this way. But yeah, Silverbolt in 9th. Let's move on to Pollo Loco in 8th. Pollo Loco, another marble, I think, that really didn't have a good race in this race. And it looked like they were having a good one up until the very end, because they started in P6, like I just said for Silverbolt, where Silverbolt would be starting in race 10. Pollo Loco started there in this race, and you could see in the start that was a very good position to start because they had one of the best starts. And they were close to the front for most of the race, and then at the end, I think they get like a bad bounce off one of the high walled sections, and that's when a bunch of the field closes up on them, and then they just fall from like 4th, 5th, 6th, around about there to like 8th, and then in the final few turns, final few straights, they go to like 11th, and then they finish in 11th. And after starting P6, they really shouldn't have done that. They really should not have fell that many spots up until right at the end. And I think Pollo Loco, after the great race, the phenomenal race they had in race 8, to stay in the championship fight, like an outside shot of the championship fight, they've completely blown that away, and now really I can't really say that they have a chance. Technically, they do have a chance of auto qualifying if they get the win and Ducktape in 4th, not Amethyst. I said Amethyst before, but Ducktape in 4th. And if they get last, and if Pollo Loco gets the win, and also if Amethyst and Crazy Cat's Eye don't do that well, then Pollo Loco can somehow auto qualify. But I just don't see that happening because Pollo Loco is starting in P11, where Silverbolt started. And that's one of the worst starting positions. So Pollo Loco, really, it's looking like it's the same stuff from Pollo Loco that we see every single season. They're always around, just slightly better than the mid pack. They're just slightly like top half. And 7th for Pollo Loco very much reflects what they do for most of their season. So Pollo Loco is in 8th. And in 7th, and I think 7th, in my mind, 7th in this ranking is much more ahead of Pollo Loco in 8th, because there's a big gap between the top 7 and everyone else. And 7th is Lollipop. And also, I think Lollipop, as much as they're ahead of Pollo Loco, I also think they're not really that close to the top 6. They're kind of in no marbles land by themselves in 7th. Lollipop had a decent race. They got 10th, which doesn't sound great, but they started in P7. Actually, they started in P7. Wait, hang on. I thought they started back row. So actually, starting P7, it's not great, obviously. It's starting far left, which isn't good on this course. But it wasn't amazing. But 10th is alright. They did beat Pollo Loco in this race. So I can't really put Pollo Loco, after having a much better starting position, ahead of them. But Lollipop, like, I can't really give them too much praise for this race. They did better than Pollo Loco. They've done a decent enough job in the past few races to get ahead of the marbles like Silverbolt, who has fallen off a cliff. They're much more ahead of Reflektor, Wisp of Darkness, all of those marbles in the bottom half. Lollipop has really turned their season around. I think I've said it in the last video. Lollipop, they've been able to get the points consistently, and that's what's helped them really solidify their middle of the pack position in 9th in the championship right now. Their starting position won't be that great. It'll be 10th for race 10, but it's not the worst in the world. I definitely think they can get some decent points. And if they can somehow scrape a top half finish, because they're still 9 points off top half, that'd be good for Lollipop. But now, Lollipop 7th. Top 6. This is where it gets interesting, because you may recall after the race we've had, we haven't talked much about the top 6 so far, because we just talked about 16th to 7th. But this race really spiced things up at the top. The top of the leaderboard definitely is the most exciting. Usually it is, but right now, going into the finale, it is more than ever, because Amethyst is who have ranked 6th, but they are well ahead of Lollipop. They can still be on for a great result in race 10. Amethyst in this race, they got 7th, and they did it from P9, which is back row. So definitely a good result for Amethyst. How did they do it? Amethyst, they didn't have a great start. I think Amethyst, it was more of a case of rising up the order throughout the whole race. And they were able to do that, not that much, only got up to 7th, but 7th is still pretty good, and it keeps them with an outside shot at the championship. And I know that the top 4 look kind of unassailable. I mean, I'm sure Amethyst, if they have a great race, they can beat like 1 or 2 of them, but Superball, Ghost Plasma, Slimer, they're either 14 or 13 points ahead. So if Amethyst wants to get a championship, they pretty much need to win and get a lot of help. And I don't see them getting a championship, but in terms of just a the absolute result in the final race, they're starting P8 in the final race. And remember what I said about the far right. The far right, especially when you see what Reflektor did at the beginning of race 9, the far right should be a recipe for success. And a marble of Amethyst caliber should be able to extract a good performance out of the P8 position. Amethyst, we haven't seen them before the season, of course, they're a rookie, but they can definitely be very pleased with their job. As long as they have a clean race in the finale and don't drop to 7th or 8th, they should be able to hold on for at least a top 5, because Crazy Cat's Eye is only 3 points behind them, but Crazy Cat's Eye is starting in P15, the worst spot. And well, Crazy Cat's Eye has had much better form as of late, and we'll get to them, because clearly there's a reason I've ranked Crazy Cat's Eye ahead. Amethyst has still been consistent, still been good, and you can see that there's a reason why they're still in the championship fight. Mathematically, they're still in the championship fight. And even if I don't think it's that realistic that they or Crazy Cat's Eye will be able to even possibly get a podium, maybe Amethyst can get a podium. Overall, this season has been very good. Recently, Amethyst has been good, and I think 6 is fair. And in 5th, unsurprisingly, I've mentioned them in Amethyst's section, but Crazy Cat's Eye is in 5th. And Crazy Cat's Eye, of course, they got the win in this race. Great race by Crazy Cat's Eye. Their overtake on Reflektor was amazing, and everything I said about Crazy Cat's Eye in the previous entry about having the pace, showing that they are able to win races, just materialized in this race. They showed exactly that if they get a good starting position, if they have to fight through a few marbles to get to the front, they have the skill to do that, and they showed it. And they held that position after they got ahead of Reflektor. They held off red number 3, they held off Slimer, Ducktape, those marbles that were catching up towards the end, and they got the 20 points. And now, if we look at the last few races, it's not just this race, because in race 8, they got 3rd place. In race 7, they got 5th place. So 5th, 3rd, and 1st in the last 3 races. That is amazing for any marble, even a championship contender, even one of the greats of the Sand Marble Rally. That is a great run of form. And Crazy Cat's Eye, I think 5th, honestly kind of undersells in the rankings. 5th kind of undersells how good they've been as of late. The only issue is they're in P15 for the finale. And as good as Crazy Cat's Eye is, I'm not so confident in their ability. They're not a Ghost Plasma or Superball or even Slimer. Slimer can do this because who can go from P16 or 15 straight to 1st in one corner. I don't think we've seen that much from Crazy Cat's Eye. Give them a good starting position and they'll do well from it. But I don't see Crazy Cat's Eye, even if they manage to push their way to the front. Like Amethyst, I don't see Crazy Cat's Eye challenging for the championship. The top 3, Ghost Plasma, Superball, and Slimer, those 3 are just too good. Those 3 are the best 3 marbles in the Sand Marble Rally of all time in this season. And those 3 are just too far ahead in points for Crazy Cat's Eye to catch up. And Ducktape, I can't discount Ducktape because they have been great recently, and we'll get to them too. Because the top 4, they're all over 10 points ahead of Crazy Cat's Eye. And so, as good as Crazy Cat's Eye has been in the last few races, obviously they're still ways off the front. They're not in the 90s, they're only at 82 points. And it's because of their early season, because they didn't have too consistent of a season. So I can't really put them higher than 5th. But still, Crazy Cat's Eye has been great, and it'll be interesting to see what they can do from P15. If they can hold on, if they can somehow beat Amethyst, because Amethyst is a much better position going into the finale. So Crazy Cat's Eye is in 5th. In 4th, and this might be, I'm not sure if this will be surprising, but certainly surprising if you didn't know the result of race 9. It's Ghost Plasma. And Ghost Plasma, of course, if you thought Dropping them from first to second was surprising after race 8 in the rankings. Now they've dropped even more. And to be fair, some people might be even surprised that they haven't dropped even more. I mean, for sure, you could say in the last 2-3 races, Crazy Cat's Eye much better than Ghost Plasma, because Ghost Plasma, last race, DNF, previous race, DNF, race 7, that was the race when they got 7th but had the very poor start, so had to cut through the back of the field to get all the way to 7th, and got aided by the DNFs. So Ghost Plasma has clearly not been good in the last few races, but of course, remember, I said the thing about Silver Bolt and how the power rankings don't just take into account the last 3 races, they also take into account the whole season. It's just that the races before the last 3 races are just weighed less. But Ghost Plasma, they were just so good in races 3 to 5, getting those 3 wins, and then even in race 6, that was pretty much a performance as good as one of those 3, because they got 4th, and had a great race then too. And over the course of the whole season, Ghost Plasma has just been a machine up until the very end, up until the very last few races, that I just can't put Ghost Plasma any lower than this. They are still in second in the championship. Ghost Plasma is in 98, and it looks like they're choking away the championship. I mean, it looks like they've already choked it away. They're already in second place. Superball already overtaken them. But look at their starting position going to the finale. They were in P13 in this spot, in this race. And actually, let's talk about their race 9 actually a bit, because we haven't talked about what they did in this race, of course, because they got the DNF, and they got the DNF because they bumped Cool Moody. So I do think a bit of unluckiness is at play, but at the top level, you can't expect a Marble to get a DNF and me to just leave them in second, ranked second in the rankings. And also Ghost Plasma, they didn't have a good start, because sure, P13 is not good, but if you want to prove that you deserve to be ranked first, ranked second overall in the rankings, a Marble of Ghost Plasma should be able to gain at least spots into the mid pack. And we've seen them do that, even more than that, in the previous races, but they couldn't do it in this race. And the consequence was they got bumped by Cool Moody, and no one was behind them to get them dislodged, and then they DNF. So not a good race from Ghost Plasma. It looks like they're choking with the championship, but just look at their starting position going to the finale. They are starting in P4. That's where Blizzard Blaster started this race. They had a great start in this race. And the only other title rival, Superball, is on the front row. And of course, Superball, we'll get to them. But Ghost Plasma, while it looks like Slimer, Ducktape, they've caught up, and they have, in points, they've caught up. They have worse starting positions in the finale. And Ghost Plasma very well could easily, I mean, while everyone's looking at Slimer, everyone's looking at Ducktape, Superball even, Ghost Plasma could very well just, all they need to do is just find a little bit of that form from race 3 to 5, and they can win the championship easily. So, like, when you consider all of that and just how much they're still in this battle for the championship, I can't put them any lower than 4th. They haven't dropped to, like, they're still in the 90s. They're still 13 points ahead of Amethyst in 5th, and they're almost guaranteed to auto qualify. And considering their starting position, they're almost guaranteed to podium. But of course, they're formed 2 DNFs on the bounce, while Slimer and Ducktape are catching up. I can't put Ghost Plasma higher than 4th. And 3rd, Slimer and Ducktape, those two have been kind of partners in crime almost. Those two podiuming together in race 7 and race 9 now. In 3rd is Ducktape. Slimer is not in 3rd. Slimer will be later than that. But Ducktape in 3rd. Ducktape had a great race in race 9. Once again, Ducktape, they're like the anti-red number 3. They're like the opposite of the Marbles that fall back. They don't get a great start, but then when, like, last 20 or so seconds in the race, you just realize that they're somehow in, like, 3rd or 2nd, and it's just like, how did they get there? But then all of a sudden they're right there, and they're getting a huge haul of points. And they're right there in the championship. Now, the top 3 in the championship, Superball, Ghost Plasma, and Slimer, 99, 98, and 98. Those 3 are the best 3 in the Sand Marble Rally of all time. But Ducktape is right there as well. 95 points. It looks like it's a battle between the top 3, but Ducktape is as much in this battle as those 3 pretty much. And the only difference, I think the differences in starting position in the finale are much more important than any like 3-point or 4-point difference from Ducktape towards the upper 3. Let's look at what they did in this race. And their move on Slimer, particularly at the end of the race, is what really makes Ducktape in this championship fight, and also takes a bit away from Slimer. Because Ducktape, how did they do it in this race? They started P3, so pretty good spot. And they get a decent start, but then after the bump off the apex at the beginning, that apex that Reflektor used very well to get in the lead, that actually hurt Ducktape because Ducktape got a kind of like a solid bounce off it, while Reflektor kind of like went over it and went through it to get in the lead. Ducktape like bounced off it, moved laterally, and then got overtaken and fell to the mid pack. And that made Ducktape's start not a very good one because they were in 8th. And then towards the end, that's when Ducktape really catches up, because you can see at like the 1 minute 30 mark, that's when Ducktape comes back to like 6th, and then that's when the field behind Crazy Cat's Eye, everyone from 2nd down, really closes up. And then Ducktape makes their move. Ducktape does what they do best, and they strike very late in the race. And they get up to 3rd in like 1 move, and then they get ahead of Slimer towards the end. And that move on Slimer, I can't exaggerate how important this is, because that move on Slimer not only gives them 3 additional points to make them go from 92 to 95, that takes away 3 points from Slimer to make them go from 101, which would be the championship lead for Slimer, down to 98. And so Ducktape, great job, great move at the end, and great job to get a 2nd place here. Very important to keep them in the running for not just the podium, but very much so in for the championship. The only thing, though, that is stopping Ducktape from beating Slimer and the top 2 in the rankings is their starting position in the final race. Because Slimer started P1 in this race. Ducktape started P3. Slimer has P16 in next race, and that's what Superball started, but that's the far right. And that is the good position that you want to start in. If it has to be the back row, I think it has to be far right. But Ducktape is starting also close to the right, but in the Grasshopper position for this race, which was P14, and that was clearly much worse. Maybe it was just a case of Grasshopper doing worse than Superball, but I definitely think P16 is better than P14 for this race. And also, I think Superball, I think Ducktape is just slightly, even if they've pretty much been as good as Slimer in this season, Slimer has that historical greatness to them. They're right up there with Ghost Plasma, potentially better than Ghost Plasma all time, and they're one of the greats. And Ducktape, I don't think they've put themselves in that category yet. I think they're just off it. This season has established them as a top marble, but to get in really that S tier category, I just haven't seen that from Ducktape. But this race could prove me wrong. If Ducktape is able to beat Slimer, if Ducktape is able to maybe even beat Ghost Plasma or Superball, I definitely could see Ducktape breaking into that top bracket of marbles in the Sand Marble Rally for me. But because of their starting position, and because I think they're just slightly worse than the top 3 in skill, I'm still predicting them to not make the podium. I'm still predicting the podium to be the other 3, Superball, Slimer, and Ghost Plasma, but not necessarily that order. So Ducktape is in 3rd, but still, great job for Ducktape. This season proved me wrong, and for sure, I will not underrate Ducktape going forward. In 2nd is Slimer, and unsurprisingly, Slimer just barely edges it out for Ducktape for me. And I'm trying to be completely unbiased here, but I think even if Ducktape beat Slimer in this particular race, both of these marbles have been great recently. In race 8, if you look, Slimer just beat Ducktape as well, 7th and 8 right there. And in race 7, Slimer beat Ducktape by 1 spot again. So actually, these two marbles have been 1 spot within each other in the last 3 races. Slimer, Ducktape, and now Ducktape, Slimer in race 9. And Ducktape is on 95 points, Slimer 98. Slimer, though, is in P8, not P8, P16, which is worse for sure. But that's still, like, if you look at the start that Superball had the great start in this race, considering that P16, you usually associate P16 with like a terrible starting spot, but Superball was able to go around on the right of all of the marbles on the left of them and just like kind of get some open space to really get through to the midfield. And they weren't able to get more than that, but if Superball can do that, I think Slimer can do that, because we've seen in the past Slimer able to get good positions from bad starting positions. And this race from P1, Slimer didn't have the bestest of the best of starts, but it's their race intelligence. I mentioned this in the last video as well, which is what put Slimer close to the front near in the middle part of the race and towards the end of the race, because Slimer took a different line from most of the marbles, I think, to get them ahead of that 6th, 7th position that they were sitting in, and all the way up to red number 3 and 3rd. Slimer was in 3rd, and then red number 3 in 2nd, and then they were close enough to make the move on red number 3, while red number 3 was falling back in the later stages. Crazy Cat's Eye was unassailable in the front, but Slimer was able to get around red number 3. Looks like they're going to get 2nd, and then Ducktape made the move towards the end. But still, great race from Slimer. I said that they needed to podium to keep their championship aspirations alive, and Slimer delivered. It was a 3rd, but a 3rd bronze medal is still a podium, and they're clearly right in there with Superball and Ghost Plasma on points 99, 98, and 98. And the only reason I'm not more confident of a Slimer title is because P16 is still not a good starting position if you compare it to what Ghost Plasma and Superball have. Ghost Plasma has P4, Superball has P1. And I think this is a good way to transition into number one ranked marble after race 9. And unsurprisingly, it is Superball. I ranked them after race 8, number 1, and clearly they delivered on their form before this race, because their start was great in this race. From P16, they showed that they're no slouch. They can get in the mid-pack, and they got 8th in the race. So once they got close to the mid-pack, they actually didn't have that great of a race. But their record on this particular hill, I think, is great compared to the other one. And Superball, I mean, I think they're the greatest of all time. They're leading the championship now. They have the best spot out of any of the title contenders. I can't really see past a Superball championship. I mean, if it's not going to be them, it's going to be Ghost Plasma or Slimer, maybe Ducktape, but the chances just point to Superball. If I had to predict, if I had to put money on it, it would be Superball all the way for the championship. One more thing I haven't actually mentioned, Superball, once again, they are the best marble at not DNFing. Maybe Slimer, maybe Ducktape can count on Ghost Plasma from a good starting position, losing it, going out of control, or just getting stuck somewhere. But Superball, it just doesn't happen. And they and Slimer are the only two marbles to not DNF. Ghost Plasma, I said it before this race in the last video, that they DNF more than they would like, and clearly that pulled through for them in this race, because they DNF'd again. Superball, once again, I'm going to say it again, if Superball is in that position, I don't see them DNFing. They would either not be in that position in the first place to get bumped by Cool Moody, or they would be bumped by Cool Moody but be able to get going again. And so Superball, I don't really see any weakness for them that would like sway me away from them and towards a marble like Slimer, Ghost Plasma, or Ducktape. I mean, I suppose if Ghost Plasma finds that early season form, which they were definitely better than they were definitely better than Superball, then Ghost Plasma can win the title. But they haven't. They've been poor as of late, and that marble that was from race 3 to 5, I don't see it. Instead, I see Superball doing better than Ghost Plasma now, and they have both the recent form and the all-time form to prove it. So I do still think Ghost Plasma will hold on for second in the championship. Superball, I think, will win the championship. I hope it doesn't happen because a repeat championship isn't the most exciting, but if anything, at least it would solidify that they are the best marble in the Sand Marble Rally, because I think not many people actually recognize that they are. Some people think it's Ghost Plasma. Some people still think Red Number 3, which is just absurd after this season. But Superball really can solidify it for most other people. They've already done it for me. Slimer, Ducktape, they are not to be discounted. They've done great recently. Can they beat Superball? We're about to find out in the final race. I'm very excited for the final race. This has potential to be one of the best finales of all time in all of JMR. It's just not just the Sand Marble Rally, but including the Marble League, Marble 1. Because just look at the standings. Have you ever seen the top 3? Sure, you could see Marble League 2021. That was crazy because so many teams were in contention. But the top 3 all separated by 1 point. I can't remember. I don't think this has ever happened in any competition in Jelle's Marble Runs. So it should be exciting. Hopefully we get a battle that goes down to the final final few seconds. Because if anything, that's really what I want above anything. I mean, I'd be super happy with a Slimer championship. It'd be a great story. Of course, that's my favorite marble. I'd be overjoyed. But if it's not Slimer, or even if it is Slimer, I just really hope it delivers on the hype that it should have, because there should be hype for this finale, because it should be a fun one. And I've realized that we're 52 minutes in. I said in the last video this one should be shorter because we only have one race to discuss, but I guess I just continue to waffle. So you're welcome, I guess, if you like hearing me waffle. But I'll wrap up now. Should have a good battle for the championship. Hopefully Slimer gets the win. If it's not Slimer, I actually hope it's Superball, because I don't as cool as Ducktape is, and I like Ducktape, as much as I like Ducktape, I don't really want them to win a title before Slimer, because I think Slimer's better. And Ghost Plasma, I feel like people get ahead of themselves saying they're the best. But Superball, it would be nice to see them solidify their place as the best Sand Marble Rally marble. But of course, Slimer from P16, that's what we're going to see. We're going to see them cut through the field. We're going to see them win the championship down to the final second. Well, how crazy would it be if Superball looks like they're going to win, and then against all odds, Superball DNFs? That would just be insane. Completely unprecedented. You can tell I'm trying to jinx it right now, because that would just be, I mean, I'd be screaming if that happened, because I just can't look past Superball finishing this race, because they just don't DNF. Hopefully Slimer also, if Slimer DNFs, I definitely think Slimer is more prone to DNFing than Superball, even though those two are both spotless in their DNF record for this season. So if Slimer DNFs, that would be devastating for them. But if any marble should worry about the DNF, it's Ghost Plasma. And Ghost Plasma, Slimer, anyway, Ghost Plasma, Slimer, Superball, Ducktape. I think realistically it's going to be one of these 4. Ducktape, I do think has a slightly less chance because of their starting position. Slimer also less than Ghost Plasma and Superball. But yeah, it should be a fun one. So I'm gonna wrap up now. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for the finale. We'll have another. Also, before I end this recording, we'll have another. I'll have another video just going through all of the marbles. I probably won't have a ranking after race 10, but I'll probably just go through them in championship order from 16th to first and go over their season as a whole, go over what happened in the finale, especially for the marbles that are up there for the marble that eventually is the champion. But we'll go through them, and we'll also go through maybe just a bit how I think the showdown will be and the marbles in the showdown, because I think we're only getting one video for the showdown, one video with 4 races. And those marbles deserve more love because a lot of those marbles haven't been seen for a long time. They've just been seen for one qualifier race and nothing else. So in the final, so after this race, champion will be crowned. We'll talk about it. We'll talk about race 10, and we'll also talk about the showdown. So I hope you'll be there to hear me waffle. Hopefully not as much as this one. But yeah, thank you so much for listening, and goodbye.